legalities out of the way while we're waiting.
Okay.
Did you all get the minutes this afternoon?
Yes,
Yes.
Did you get a chance to look them over?
a little.
Yes.
Oh, where's John Casserly, by the way? Are you comfortable accepting the minutes? So,
A motion for approval.
okay,
I'll second.
Mhm.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Bob, sorry about that. You can record now. If we missed that, there was a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting and it was carried.
Yep, I had you covered.
Okay, thank you. We are waiting for a couple of people, looks like are coming in now. We are missing one board member, Mr. Casserly.
And Mr. Sparkman just signed on, so he's in.
We'll let him get in and get comfy.
Did you see? Did you see my team? I don't know if they're entering the right way. I've entered through your web.
We're here, Emma, both Bill and I. This is Mark Richardson. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, is that everybody on your side? Or enough people on your side to get going?
It is, thank you.
I'm assuming that John will be along here at some point. Don't know where he went, but. Okay, since the last meeting, we have heard from both the developer and from the Roses. Both have addressed many of their points. I'll let Bill, your team go first. Or Mark, whoever wants to speak for you guys.
Sure, I appreciate that. Just a quick introduction. My name is Mark Richardson. I'm the CEO of US Light Energy. I'm actually taking this meeting on behalf of Mike Fingar, who's our COO, who you guys have met already. Mike is actually out on paternity leave. He and his wife had a baby boy last weekend. So
Cool. Congrats to them.
yeah, I made him not come to work. He wants to come to work. I told him to stay home. So. But with that, I'm going to let Bill kind of go over the plans and address some of the changes that we've made. And then I think there were some other issues that I wanted to address, but I thought we'd start with that if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Very good.
All right. So hi, my name is Bill Sparkman from Chase & Companies. So I think where we can start off, let me try to share my screen. Hopefully that is successful. Do you know, Mike, or whoever is running the meeting, can they allow me to share the screen or no?
I believe Bob can do that.
Give it a try.
There we go. Okay, so can you folks see my screen over here with the plans up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So real quick, I don't want to spend too much time going in. So we basically took a lot of the comments that we received from the board during the meeting. Also discussion with the Roses as well. And we tried to craft a revision that we think addresses a lot of the concerns. So we've obviously inserted the survey of the property, which you'll see right here. So that's helpful into kind of citing the location of the site. As we move into the site plan, we've revised the site layout specifically with regards to its interaction with the neighboring property, the Roses. So as you can see here, we're keeping everything outside of the 100-foot setback. That includes our access road here to the south, except for the portion that cuts across the southerly portions of the parcels. So we're basically going to extend this gravel road, as discussed in the last meeting, into our site. And we're going to basically make the turn outside of the 100-foot setback, which is right about to here. So that basically removes the road and this fence line and the panels outside of that setback. So the only thing you're going to be seeing along this portion of the neighboring property is that gravel access road, coming into our property. And then this plan also shows our interconnection design at the moment. Basically shows, where the poles are going to be located. This is the interconnect with the utility. Basically going to be extending the line from the existing utility pole in the Roses yard. And bringing it into our site where we're going to establish connection. Also, additional changes are for site screening. We basically are proposing, length of screening along the property line here of the residential property. That includes a species of arborvitae directly adjacent to the poles. And then for the remainder of the perimeter, it's going to be a northern bayberry, which is on the taller side of the shrubs. And then really everything besides that is pretty much what we established before. We had a couple more comments from the board. We added in a table of some of the areas. I know there were some questions about, how much is the panel footprint taking up? How much of the panels are in the wetlands? I think there was a question about the tree removal, how many acres of removal there's going to be. So we provided those numbers for you there. And I think in terms of the changes made, I think that's probably about it, honestly, in terms of what was discussed at the meeting, as far as the site plan is concerned.
Okay.
Are there any questions on the changes that we made?
No, pretty clear.
So I think, the gist of it is that we really wanted to focus on, how, we're interacting with the neighbors. We wanted to make sure that we, as much as possible, remove everything out as far as we can away from them, provide the screening that'll help, offset, the panels, and really, just try to, tighten things up down here. I know there was a little bit of, ambiguity and like, kind of a misdesign down here where the access was coming in. And we apologize again for that. Just had to do with the way that the survey was coming in compared to the GIS parcels. But that's all been cleaned up. So we show how we're proposing the access drive is going to come into the site, make sure that we just extend it out to where we need to get it to and then bring it into the site.
So did
So-
the easement and ownership of that access ever get settled?
So, Mike, I actually just sent you a memo that kind of outlines the research that we did into that question. I know, obviously, you haven't had a chance to read it, and the board obviously hasn't had a chance to review it. But basically what we did is we researched a lot of the deeds, a lot of the instruments pertaining, as far as we could for the county clerk, basically discussing how, and I actually have it on the county tax map here, how this used to be a road right here, Jane's Road, how you can kind of see it extending through the Cornell Cooperative and the Roses 2 properties here and extending across this other part of Mr. Brewer's property. And there is various mentions to this road, which is abandoned, and how access to the sites would be provided along this abandoned road. How a road has been maintained, obviously within that kind of access area, and that's historically how these properties have maintained access to Mead Road. So we kind of provide you a memo to that effect that summarizes what we're finding, which we strongly believe provides evidence that access to the Brian Brewer's property out here where our project site is provided to Mead Road.
Yeah, I did get that. I just sent it off to the board. So any questions from the board at this point?
You decided to go with Northern Bayberry as one of the plant materials for the screen. According to what I can read online, it only gets to 9 feet tall. Is that going to be tall enough to block view from the Roses property?
I mean, I know that and maybe Mark can speak to this. I know they've had a lot of success with those on their projects. I know basically where we're providing it, right up against, tight with the property line there. That's obviously going to be the point of greatest, efficiency in terms of screening. And I think the tallest at the array at any point in terms of the height of the apparatus is 12 feet. I thought I heard that or read that the bayberry can get up to 12 feet, but honestly, I'm not a horticulturist, so I'm not a real expert on that. But I mean, obviously, if it is the input from the board, if they have suggestions or requirements per the code that it should be something else, I mean, I think we're willing to entertain that.
I think you should do the arborvitae all the way around. And there's a techie arborvitae that grows to 12 to 15 feet.
Mm.
And that would probably block the view of the solar
But
array.
didn't we also say that, or Pam was pointing out at our last meeting that the land itself is sloped upward? So that you have not only just the right at the meeting of the property lines, but that as the land progresses up, there is an upward slope. So my question is, what is the height at that upward point?
Right. I
So
mean,
what- I'm sorry. So I'll take a couple of these questions. So the northern bayberry, I am not a horticulturist either, but it was my understanding that that would max out at about 12 feet. We generally try and choose vegetative screening that is intended to not grow very tall in an effort to reduce the likelihood of shading. But we do understand that it needs to be tall enough to screen the property properly and do its intended job. One of the things, and the Techni arborvitaes is definitely one that we've seen before and we've actually used before. So we're certainly willing to investigate that. One of the things that I think we could potentially do would be to provide a rendering of what that might look like with that grade as it kind of pitches up a little. I'm not intimately familiar with that site, but you can see there's some topographical underneath this layout. So it does look like it slopes slightly. I guess my concern there is, from what vantage point would we want to try and screen that out? I mean, we feel like we've provided a pretty dense vegetative barrier there, and if it's really the height of that's the concern, we can certainly address that. But we could also provide a rendering of the proposed vegetation at its at year 1, at year 5, at year 10, perhaps, and what that would look like.
Okay. Last time we talked a little bit about the 2 acres of trees that would be removed from this site. And in your rendering of your plans, it talks about you saving those. Does it talk about you saving those trees and replanting them somewhere? Or was that only about the arborvitaes and the bayberries?
No, I don't think our intent would be to save the trees for replanting. I know there was discussion about any displaced farm soils would be stockpiled on site
I saw that.
for potential future years. But for the trees, no, there was no plan for that.
Okay, so you're not really replacing 2 acres worth of trees. You're just replacing a few trees.
Correct.
In your proposed tree line, you've got an existing tree line. Is that all existing there, or are you planting more trees in that tree line as well?
No, those are all, so basically there's a pretty dense tree
Mhm.
coverage. I'll bring over the map. On that part, so there really, I don't believe would be a whole lot of area to plant more trees. So we're basically up in this corner here. So this is pretty much all treed already.
So it's already, they're all existing is what
Yes,
you're
correct.
saying. I wondered if you would take me through that interconnection cables. I see where it's the underground piece of it, but is any of it above the ground?
Yes, actually, and this is mislabeled. I apologize about that. So the above ground portion is from the existing pole in front of the Roses property to where our series of poles begins. And I believe, I forget which pole it is, but one of these end poles here is considered the riser pole. I think it's the last one actually. And that's where the cable actually goes underground. So this would all be underground. It's labeled as overhead, but this portion over under here would be underground. But everything above here, this is a series of utility poles. All of this would be above ground.
Above the ground?
Yes.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
I mean, they're pretty standard utility poles that you would see along the side of the road. I think they don't look any different.
They're just regular utility poles.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. And I can speak a little bit to that. So we would propose to run the connection pole or the connection there along the access road and keep it out, you know. But keep in mind that is all of that design is really subject to the final approval from National Grid. So we have our written approvals for our proposed plan, but they still need to go out and do a site visit and look at the proposed pole locations, make sure it's acceptable to them. So there is some possibility that could change slightly. It's not likely to change dramatically or change locations altogether, but the very specific location of one or more of those poles could adjust by a couple of feet in either direction, kind of depending on what the utility requires of us.
Okay. And last time we talked a little bit about a feasibility study showing under voltage or over voltage potential of this solar array. Was that done?
I'm not familiar with that. Could you maybe elaborate a little on what that? On what,
I think it was in our minutes from last month. We talked about, there was a concern, I think maybe even from the Roses saying, well, is there any possibility of too much voltage going through that solar array connecting to the utility poles?
so
Yeah, there was a question about how it's regulated coming from the site to the poles to the interconnect. And if there could be an overcharge or too much voltage.
the answer is simply no. And the utility goes to great lengths and great pains to make sure that their system will not be impacted. One of the main things that we do in our due diligence process is go through that utility application and approval process prior to coming to the board, because it is one of kind of the most it's the most technical, it's the most detailed, it's the most engineering intensive piece of developing a solar project. The utility takes upwards of 6 months to approve these projects, and during that time they do very detailed interconnection studies, specifically with the impact of this array on their equipment and their grid, and how it may impact other users down the line, all the way to substation and beyond. So the protections, the reason you see so many poles there is because there are things called reclosers, which are very sensitive to voltage change. There's gang operated air brakes, so you can shut the system down in emergency if necessary. There's metering poles. There's a transformer that would be located in that group. So the likelihood, I can't say that it is absolutely impossible that there would be no impact ever, but the utility has accepted our application, and their main concern, as mandated by the Public Service Commission, is reliability. And they want to make very, very sure that these types of systems don't have negative impact on neighbors and other users on that line. and probably even more importantly to them, a negative impact on their system where it could cause an outage or, high voltage or something like that. They're very concerned about reliability and performance of their system. And so they really do make us go to great lengths to prove that these systems will not create those kind of conditions.
Okay. Has the Canton Fire Department reviewed this plan and approved it? Or is it too early for that?
It's probably a little early in the process for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we would absolutely look for input from the EMS and fire. Once we were fairly confident that the plan was more or less finalized, but certainly that is something that we absolutely intend to do, and that is something that we do on every project. And it's also kind of part of our ongoing O&M efforts is to make sure that all the access roads are kept up and that anybody who may need access to the site in an emergency could get there. But to my knowledge, and Bill, maybe you can jump in here. To my knowledge, we have not reached out to the fire or EMS locally about this project specifically yet.
No, not yet.
I have another question too. I noticed that you had a memo from the what's the name of that? The Army Corps of Engineers about the regulated activities regarding the wetlands, but I wondered if you also needed the Fish and Wildlife approval.
I mean, the type of activity that we're doing here, I know that we do in terms of screen, we do for the SWIP, we go through the endangered species checklist as part of as part of the seeker determination as well. So that really is just kind of a check on their system to see if any endangered species are being impacted, which we've done, and that is negative.
I'm speaking from personal experience. My son put in a solar array in a wetland and he was approved by the Army Corps of Engineers, and then Fish and Wildlife came in and said, no, you can't do it that way.
I mean, as far as I know, I mean, with federally jurisdiction wetlands, I mean, we submit to the Army Corps, if they give us, a permit to proceed, that's typically what we do.
Okay. So you don't really worry about Fish and Wildlife.
I mean, it's never come up as far as I know of. Obviously I don't know the particulars of your interactions, so I can't say, but I've definitely never have experienced that on, any of our projects.
Yeah, I would concur with that. That's generally not something that if Fish and Wildlife had a concern, I would think it would be addressed through the DEC and their jurisdictional determination. And that's unusual and unfortunate that happened to your son. But that's not something we've experienced
Right.
today.
Mike, this is Bob. Can I be recognized to ask for a point of clarification?
Absolutely.
Hi, this is Bob Washoe. I'm on the town board. I'd just like to clarify the memo that addressed the Army Corps of Engineers issue was a memo that, unless I read it wrong, came from actually Chazen Associates and not from the Army Corps of Engineer. I think it was authored by Barbara Beal, who I believe works for Chazen and not the Army Corps.
Right.
So I would just suggest that the board not use that as a reference from the Corps itself, and that some sort of clarification from the Corps specifically is also produced at some point. Thank you.
So, I mean, my response to that would be is that in terms of the nationwide permits, which would be something that we would be, under the regulations for, I mean, we're basically, as consultants, we basically interpret the regulations and the codes, as written. And there's pretty clearly delineated language within the Army Corps' permit structure on what's considered a regulated activity and what is not. So that memo is basically just a way to kind of walk through the regulations that pertain to the site and the project. and how the pilings as proposed for the solar support would not be a regulated activity. So I guess I don't know what else we could provide. So to get a non jurisdictional determination from the Corps would be something that they don't really take a lot of interest in. They're not really, they obviously they've got a lot of things on their plate. So they to issue a nationwide permit is one thing, but to get them to to determine on site that they don't have jurisdiction is not something that's real high on their priority list. So I guess I would need to know what is it that the board is looking for in this aspect.
Well, this memo does reference the Army Corps' rule or permit process here, and I see what you have highlighted there is probably what the question everybody is asking. I would think that we could read through this and make the determination whether we agree with your internal assessment or not.
I would agree. That would be something that we can, I think, definitely support. If you have any further questions on our interpretation of the code, please, feel free to, to ask. But basically, the way that I'm kind of pointing to the passage, I guess that Mike, that's probably what you're referring to.
Right.
It basically, unless there is some kind of, they basically would only consider pilings to be a regulated activity if there's a lot of them. And if they were to provide basically a change in the land as currently, as currently exists, and that simply is not the case here.
Let's move to the noise question. Do we know what kind of noise is generated from the general operation of this size array? From the power, I don't think there's any noise from the power being generated from the panels itself, but from the power being sent out.
So I can speak. Yeah, I can speak to that. And in this case, we've actually put the inverters in the middle of the array. But generally speaking, the inverters are the only noise producing element of something like this. And they do produce a hum, like a transformer that you may hear. And generally speaking, that is in the range of about 70 decibels at 10 feet. So there is some noise produced, but it is not, it's not extremely loud. 70 decibels is not even as loud as a vacuum cleaner, say. And that's at 10 feet. So at 100 feet, you're likely to not even be able to hear it at all. And then the utility piece of that, the overhead lines, would produce the same amount of noise that any other utility application would produce. So you may, if you're close enough, you could probably hear a transformer create a low buzz, but you'd have to be pretty close to that. And generally, even at the bottom of a pole, you can't hear those very, very well, if at all, unless of course there's a malfunction, and that's kind of a different scenario. But under normal circumstances, there's very low noise emittance.
$612 feet, if I'm reading that right.
I think it's actually 812. 812, yeah.
812.
It's hard to see.
Well, you probably need to go to the property line, not to the residence, because people use their backyards a lot of times
Sure.
in the North Country.
That's about 450-ish.
Okay.
Good reference, thank you. Any other questions from the board at this point?
I have some questions about the decommissioning plan.
Oh, yeah, well,
When
I
we
did
get
too.
there.
Go ahead, Deb.
Okay. Just a couple of things with the decommissioning plan. One is, could you add photographs or an archival color images before construction? So we know what it looked like before you did the construction. So when you decommission it, it looks the same or similar to.
Yeah, we absolutely can do that.
And then also, I believe underneath number 3, the decommissioning, you have within 12 months, but our policy says within 180 days.
So we would ask for a bit more time than 180 days. And the reason being is that if for instance, so it's the reason we give ourselves 12 months, we like to give ourselves 12 months if at all possible, is because there is a bit of a wind down in the process. So at the end of life of a project, the project owner has to make determinations about the financial viability of that project, about whether to continue to operate it, about what the kind of pros and cons are of still participating in a given program at that time. And one of the reasons that we use a 25-year term for the base lease is that is the length of term that the Public Service Commission has guaranteed the payment mechanism for these types of projects. So this is a community solar project. The way that the revenue, excuse me, is determined for a community solar project is guaranteed for 25 years. So beyond that, that's why we ask for some extensions. Beyond that, it's not quite known yet what that economic position would look like. And so once a determination is made to end of life a project, I would think that the project owner would need a little bit of time to coordinate an effort to get a contractor on site, to mobilize equipment, to schedule that. And so generally speaking, we would like to, it's probably not likely to take a full 12 months, but we would like to build in a couple of months buffer because there's weather to be considered, et cetera. So if we had a particularly bad winter, that could easily take 3 or 4 months out of a construction timeline pretty quickly. So that's why we generally ask for 12 months. And we would ask for your consideration on that, but it's certainly something that I think we would be willing to modify, but 180 days would be kind of the limit.
I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. The 180 days comes in after the 1-year abandonment.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is a misunderstanding on my part. I apologize for that.
And
So
then
we would like to get it done in 12 months immediately after abandonment,
okay.
or no longer.
Well,
in commercial operation.
the town plan says that you need to begin within 180 days after the 1-year abandonment period.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the board's opinion, does that mean that our 12-month proposal here would meet that guideline?
I would say so. I have the town plan here in front of me. Major solar collection system shall be deemed to be abandoned after it ceased operating for a continuous 1-year period. Upon cessation for a period of 1 year, the town may notify the owner and or operator of the facility to implement the decommissioning plan. Within 180 days of that notice, the owner and operator can either restore the operation or implement the decommissioning plan. So there's quite a bit of time frame in there with which to negotiate with the owner if you need to, or bring the operation back up to at least 80%.
Yeah, I that's certainly my interpretation of our plan is that upon cessation of active operation, within 12 months of that period, it would be removed. So we theoretically shouldn't even get to the point where you would need to impose the decommissioning plan per the town law.
Okay,
So it's within the constraints of the policy.
correct.
Okay, thank you for
But
clarification.
There is one little hitch in your plan still. the decommissioning bond or surety must be put up before the certificate, the building certificates is issued to you, not during the process or during the occupation certificate, if you will. That has to be settled with the town board prior to the code enforcement officer allowing you to go ahead with the project at all.
So prior to issuing of the building permit,
Correct.
that should be fine. That's not a problem.
The other part with the decommissioning plan is the return of the topsoil. I didn't see that in there.
I know that the topsoil is to be kept on site. The spoils will be kept on site for use in that effort. If it's not clear in the language of this plan, we can certainly add some more specific language about reutilizing the topsoil, any topsoil that was removed and stored on site.
I think it should be there.
Okay.
Yeah, it does speak to it in other parts of your plan, but it probably should be that it's specifically spelled out here in your decommissioning plan.
Okay, we'll insert that language.
Other questions from the board so far?
I would like to see more language about the sign someplace. What that sign is going to look like. I know you said it's within our guidelines, but I didn't see, the dimensions of the sign.
We can definitely add the signage detail to the plan set. That's pretty minimal. Basically just enough to meet the NEC guidelines for emergency contact and identification. Also, there will be signage around the perimeter fence, as a warning sign. That's all pretty standard, but we can include that information into the set.
Yeah, just to add to that, to Bill, the signage is the NEC required signage, and it's not intended for use as advertising or anything like that at all. It's strictly informational and any hazard warnings and things that are required by the NEC.
Mhm.
Anything else from the board? I would assume that the Roses would like to speak.
Absolutely.
Are we on, Mike?
Yep.
Okay. So it's hard for me to, this is a lot for me to take in right now. You forwarded this, all these documents to me this morning. My day had already started. Mike Fingar, my last communication with him via email on November 25th. I gave him my email to forward these changes. I've heard nothing till this morning when you sent me all the documentations. I have not even, this is the first time seeing it right now. My day had already started, like I said, when you forwarded the stuff to me. It's hard for me to take all this in. Yes, obviously they've made some changes. There's a lot more changes that I can see that need to be made. One of the first things, if I remember, on their first plan said no ambient noise. And now we're talking about 70 decibels. That's all got to be clarified. The plantation of the trees, they said would be in the last meeting was immediate. blockage. And now we're talking about plants that have grown 9-10 foot high in how many years? So that needs to be readdressed. There's just a lot needs to be readdressed, I guess. And like I said, I'm sorry, but it's hard for me to take all this in on a short notice.
Yeah, just as a point of clarity, what I think I sent you a short note saying that, typically this board doesn't send that information out. But, we're volunteers, we don't, we all have jobs. That information is always available from Jeff at the code office. After a meeting like this, when the developer resubmits any changes in plans, you can get those right from Jeff. I mean, you can hound him, starting a week later to make sure that you can get them from him. I'll get them and, not even think that you need to see them,
No, Mike, I'm not blaming anybody.
No, I just want to make sure you know how to get that information in your hands sooner than, we got it to you today.
Nope. I'm just iterating the fact that Mike Fingar told me he had my email address. And he told me as soon as the changes were made, he would gladly forward them to him. Thank you for the communication. And I've heard nothing from Mike Fingar.
His actual words were, he sent us the email on November 25th at 3:24 in the afternoon. And he thanked Jim for emailing him and said that he would get the new plans to us the next week, which would have been the first week of December. We've never heard another word from him.
So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Mike became a new father on December 4th. So in his absence, I've been taking over for him. So any lack of communication is completely my fault, and I apologize for that. But I was not aware until very, very recently, as recently as today, that there was some missing communication with you folks. And it was my responsibility to get to you, and I did not do that. I apologize on behalf of myself and on the company's behalf. It's not typically how we behave. So if you're so inclined, I'd be more than happy to set up a time to talk to you outside the meeting, or even now. I don't want to take the whole board's time with that, but I'm more than happy to set that up. And I apologize for the timing of Mike's arrival, but it set us all back a little. It was a couple weeks before we had planned. So
No disrespect or respect to you, Mark, or anyone else. But nobody has contacted us through this at all. And it's our property that you're crossing. And when you guys spoke on the right of way, it kind of was skirted a little bit because it is ingress and egress. We still don't know. Do you have the right to take power across it? Do you have the right to use our power poles? Have you guys addressed that?
So it's my understanding that the power is actually owned by the utility. And
No, we paid for it.
well, even though you paid for it, it's now owned by the utility. It's not your property. So when we make an upgrade to the utility, we pay them millions of dollars, quite literally, and the equipment is all ultimately owned by them. It's not owned by us. So the utility company, my understanding is that they do in fact have the right to issue that right of way. But again, if we're talking about an easement allocation, I think that's something that we'd be happy to talk about. It really is ingress and egress. The power is governed by the Public Service Commission and the utilities. It's really not we wouldn't own that, even though we would pay for it, much like you did. We're effectively paying to extend that line onto the Brewers property, just as you did to extend the line to yours.
So
Jim and Pam, are some of these changes a result of a conversation you guys have had already?
What are you talking about?
That some of the changes that they have made, have you guys talked with Mike or
We have had
Bill
no conversation with anyone at all.
since our last meeting?
None,
none.
not like they said they would.
Okay, Mark, that probably has to be addressed.
Yeah, clearly. And that's like I said, it's totally my fault. I was supposed to take that up from Mike, and frankly, I didn't get a hold of everything. Mike has been obviously busy the last couple of weeks. So it's not an excuse. It's just an explanation. So that is on me, and I apologize for that.
So when you show this plan here too, and you talk about going underground from the poles that are after you get onto Mr. Brewer's property, so you're gonna have to put more poles in to get to Mr. Brewer's property, correct?
There was probably just going to be one additional pole required, as you showed, Bill's got it shown there. What's not entirely clear is the exact location of that pole. I think on this drawing, it shows it going over the corner of the property, but I would think that where it's labeled R40 there would actually probably be out closer to where the gravel access drive bullet is, and then enter into property. But again, that would have to really be determined by the utility company themselves when they come out and actually do a physical site visit once the road is constructed, and they can really put eyeballs on where that needs to be. But we would not anticipate any other poles that would need to be installed adjacent to your property. It would be once it was beyond your property and onto the Brewer property.
And that's quite a stretch from the pole that we put in on our driveway to the back of our property.
Yeah, generally you can go a couple 100 feet between poles.
Mark,
Did your earlier explanation, I guess, probably answered my question, is you're not able to go underground from that first pole because of the safeguards that are on the poles?
So, yeah, that's correct. So even if we went on, we could ask the utility to go underground from the existing pole to the new service drop, but at that point it would have to come up, and the utility requires us to put this equipment above ground. There's just on poles. There's really no way to do it otherwise.
I thought so. I just wanted to clarify.
No.
And would you clarify how high are those poles that are gonna be in the back of the property as well?
Their standard utility pole height, I would say, I don't know that I have that number, 12 to 15 feet. Bill, do you happen to have that number?
12 to 15 feet?
I don't have that for this one. I can look at the one that we did for a different project. I don't know if are they project specific, Mark? The heights?
They would need to meet the utilities requirements for height. And again, because this is, even though we're designing and proposing this, ultimately this becomes utility owned property. So all those poles that you see that are proposed, those are all utility owned until the last one, effectively where we come underground. So we really have to go by their mandate. We don't have a lot of leeway in designing that equipment. And this is what was proposed in our plan to the utility on our electrical drawings.
So
And
12
this is what's been approved by utility.
12 to 15 feet sounds really short to me for a utility pole, but I don't know that. But that alone, if you are correct about that, is already way higher than your trees are gonna get.
And I think it is. I think you're correct, Mrs. Rose. It is higher than that.
Thank you.
I think 3-phase poles are 35 feet tall.
That sounds more realistic.
When I put my entrance in, I had to run 30 feet of extra wire to get to the top.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that that I personally have ever had to measure one.
but I guess what we're getting at is you're talking about instant blockage. And even if it was a 25 foot pole, we're talking some pretty significant coverage to block that.
Well, I would suggest that our effort is to block the array itself and not necessarily every piece of utility owned equipment that gets installed. Generally speaking, when you install a utility pole, it is incredibly difficult to block that from view, particularly on day one. As you mentioned, let's assume it is 35 feet tall, you're talking about planting 35-foot mature trees. It's just not a practical, that's not a practical solution. But what we would offer is blockage of the array itself. And the other thing is that we don't want mature or trees that are going to grow so tall that they would ultimately shade the array. So generally speaking, the shadow casting length is 2.5 times the height of a given obstruction. So if there were 50-foot tall trees, you would need 125 feet. It would cast a shadow 125 feet from the edge. So, but in this case, we have the 100-foot setback that we've respected. So we believe that we've proposed a fair and useful screening tool. And again, I think this is a discussion we can certainly have with you, and we're happy to do that. And I apologize it hasn't happened before tonight.
For your reference, the our solar law does speak of poles. It does not require them to be screened.
So Mark, back to the communication. Mike, am I on?
Yes, yep.
Okay. I didn't, so Mark, back to the communication. I mean, we heard the same, I mean, happy for Mike, you know, congratulations, new baby. That's awesome. But we heard the exact same verbiage from Mike at the last month's meeting, that he apologized that they had not been in contact with us to discuss this project. And here we are 30 days later. And we are in the same boat we were 30 days ago, other than what you guys have just come up with for these changes. And here you are apologizing that there's been no communication. And I have a real problem with no communication. I mean, can things be discussed? Absolutely. But when we have no communication, it's a problem.
Understood. But at the same time, we're trying to meet our obligation to the board, and the zoning laws very specifically have solar included, and we've done our best to create a plan that meets those. And generally speaking, our first effort to any planning board is to get their feedback, and not necessarily to ask the neighbors what they would prefer on day one. Granted, in this case, we've missed an entire meeting, and I can't apologize more than I already have. And you have, you know, all I can give you is my commitment that if you want to engage in a conversation, we will do so, and that conversation will be with me, not anyone else in my company.
Well, that would be appreciated, but again, we've got a little bit of a sour taste because that hasn't happened. And I want to go back to the easement again, because you're saying that you guys have the right to do this. Is transmission easement is that part of this? I mean, it's not my understanding of the easement.
I'm not sure what you mean by transmission easement.
Well, that you're putting more power and poles on an easement to the property that, in my understanding, is ingress, egress, basically to and from. That does not mean poles and construction can go across the easement.
So I think I would leave that to the experts on ingress and egress, but I would suggest that if you were able to build a 3-phase power line to your property, that by the same rules and regulations that you had access to do that, Mr. Brewer would have access to do that to his property.
Well, it was on our property. We had it granted to us. Does Mr. Brewer have it granted to him? Do you have it granted to you? That's my question.
Through the lease, the rights to the land are granted to us through the lease of that property. We don't own it, but we're allowed to use it.
right, and there's in the same respect that he is. I think you need to do some homework, I guess.
Well, we've certainly been trying to do that. We provided a pretty detailed memorandum to the board today about the easement as we believe that it exists. And again, we're happy to share that with you and try and come to some understanding there.
Well, let's get off that subject for a minute. Can I get back to the point that was brought up from the Army Corps of Engineers right on the first page? And again, this is from Chase and Company. It's not from the Corps. It says grubbing of shrub and vegetation is a regulated activity. So these trees you want to plant is in the wet area. How well do they grow? And is that permitted with the Army Corps Engineer planting in that area?
That's definitely a good question. I know that, obviously, a vegetation in, a wetland area is not definitely a bad thing. But we can definitely provide some language to that to provide some surety, and how the Corps views that kind of an activity. If that would make them, provide some more information for that.
And can you tell me, again, we just got this today, so we haven't been able to relook at everything because we had to work today. What are the height of the panels themselves?
I think the maximum height is 12 feet.
12 feet. So they're the max height of hopeful growth of the trees as well.
Right.
And who, when and if this happens, how do we know who has the authority to go in and out and cross the property, and who maintains it? I mean, because we maintain the road. We fill it with gravel every year. We grade it, we plow it, we do everything.
So post-construction, the access to the site is limited to just a couple of times per year, generally a pickup truck for any kind of maintenance that may be needed, or if there's an issue on site that needs to be dealt with. Certainly, I would suggest that during construction, we would improve and maintain that road. Post-construction, we would dress that road and actually leave it in as good or better condition than we found it. As far as maintenance throughout the winter and how to maintain that road, I guess that's something that we would need to work out together. We would generally, if your property were not there, we would maintain that access road ourselves. So but generally speaking, we do not maintain it in the same way that you might maintain it for a daily driver. So, we might wait till it gets to be 6 inches to plow instead of 2, for instance, just because we don't generally need thorough, day-to-day access to that. We need to keep it obviously open for emergency vehicles and things of that nature. But if that is something that that we can work on together, then I think that's something we'd be happy to participate in.
I think we can get this memorandum about the easement over to our attorney and let him look at it and see how, I mean, just briefly glancing at it, it looks fairly clear. It takes it way back. But I would think, I know I would want a legal opinion on this. We want to make sure that you have clean legal access to this road. Or that Mr. Burwell indeed had it. Looking at this briefly, it looks like he does. Mr. Brewer got it from Burwell's. Jim got it, part of it from the Burwells, it looks like. I don't want to get into the legalese because it gets a little technical here for me, but I would want the lawyer to look at it, but it looks like the answer's in this document one way or the other. And we'll get that, and I'll get that over to Eric tomorrow.
Mr. Ryder has some questions. I'm not sure he knows how to raise his hand on this.
Can I talk?
Go ahead.
I guess with the plan, you know, that there's a number of assumptions, I think some misleading, some contradictory information that's there. If you go to the full environmental assessment form, it talks about page 7 of 13, but it's page 8 of 15. The original submittal had no noise above local ambient levels will be produced during the operations. Now it looks like we're going to take somebody's word that's only 70 dBs on a solid state exciter. And I don't know if it's exciter or exciters, if there's transformer or transformers, what's the size of the transformers? Are they oil filled? Is there forced air, forced oil? I mean, all those things can add noise to that. And they're showing the Jane Road was split between Rose and Cornell, I think the guy said, Brewer and somebody else. All of a sudden they shifted the whole thing, I think, over towards the Rose area for this road that's been abandoned, saying that they have access. So there's, you know, we're taking people's word for things that really haven't been hashed out. And I'm not sure if everybody's had an opportunity to kind of go through and look at the drawings that were put in. And the submittal on the Army Corps of Engineers, I thought said for construction only. So I wasn't sure if it's an operational proof also. And kind of going with that, some lady had talked about the environmental, the DEC. If there's oil in those transformers, transformers will fail. Transformers during maintenance will leak. There could be a catastrophic fail. There needs to be some type of containment pit and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that I think are missing from the board. The board can kind of talk on. They talked also about the reclosure, these circuit switchers, and there's transformers at the Niagara Mohawk site. So there's additional noise. All these things aren't really kind of been brought out for everybody.
Could I, for clarification purposes, could you explain to the board your connection?
Potential partial or full owner of Boyden Brook Body Works.
Okay. For my clarification, and maybe the board, so when you talk about the transformers and the oil, are you talking about the transformers on the pole?
I don't know. If you look at the decommissioning plan, it talks about disposal, and there is some oil. And I don't know if some oil is 10 gallons, 20 gallons, 100.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I thought the transformers on the poles are going to be just like National Grid's transformers. And, you know, there's no containment set up for those.
Right.
I think in the decommissioning plan, we're talking about very minor amounts of oil, if I'm correct, Mark and Bill.
But a catastrophic failure
That's correct, Mike.
What is it? I mean, it's hopefully this isn't the first one they've ever built, so they must have a footprint of what's going in.
We'd be happy to provide you with some cut sheets for all the specified materials, which we would provide prior to the building permit. Anyway, that's generally part of it. This discussion is really about site plan, site use, zoning, and we generally stay away from very specific details about the equipment, not to be intentionally obscure, but that it's generally the next step of the process when we go to the building permit that we provide that level of detail, engineered stamp drawings, et cetera, to the building department for their review and approval.
But it seemed like if you're going to have oil, you need a spill prevention plan, and in there, besides containment, you need to have a secondary containment because it's going to run downhill. And if you look, there's
yeah, sir, I'm sorry, but that's not something that we have ever encountered before. Any oil is an oil-filled transformer, and to my knowledge, those are sealed and they are not required to have any kind of containment or pit. This is not something that it's not like an auto or machine shop where you need to change the oil in those regularly. So that is not something that is ever part of our proposals.
But I'm assuming they have to put the oil in there, so there's got to be a spigot.
No. Those come sealed oil from the factory. The oil is used as a cooling mechanism.
Yep.
To maintain temperature.
With a 5 megawatt unit, it seems like you're going to have, some type of cooling is going to be needed. whether it's radiators, it's internal. I guess I'd want to see your spec sheet.
Well, that'll all be part of the building permit. But I'm happy to share a typical spec sheet for a transformer. I would have to dig into the electrical drawings to find out exactly what we expect on this one. Was not prepared to talk to that level of detail on the electrical plans tonight, but it is something that we can certainly provide.
But it seemed like, the board really couldn't permit something that they don't have the full details on.
Well, no, you misunderstand. That's not part of our scope.
Okay.
This is site plan.
Okay.
When we get to that level of detail, that's the code enforcement officer it's up to him to make sure that the plan meets the electrical code before he issues the permit. Our job here is to make sure that this plan, it's called a site plan. And it's a special permit process. We just need to make sure that everything that they propose meets our code, and our code does not speak specifically of any of the things you've just addressed. So
But I think
those things can and will be addressed with the code enforcement officer when they get to the point of asking for a building permit.
Okay.
Anything else?
Oh, I got a whole bunch of questions, but I guess this isn't the right meeting for it.
Yeah, if it's just along the same lines, it's outside the scope of our job.
Because the easement, like I said, they're taking that Jane Road and pushing all towards the Roses, and then they're taking this distribution line or transmission line, wherever you guys are calling it. And all of a sudden the Roses are losing the verticality of that onto the Brewers. So to me, they're making an assumption that they can plot the line through it that way.
Well, that's, I believe, if I'm correct, Mark, that's National Grid's position.
What National Grid would need the easement. And if they're being led to believe that they have an easement, that to me, that's once again, that's a misleading, contradictory thing that people are
Well,
portraying.
if it's the easement you're talking about, definitely we'll get that to the attorney to make sure it's correct. And it was one of our concerns early on, that easement it actually existed. To take that one step further, I'd like to see that Jim and Pam have that easement. Because we're acting on their word, and not that none of us don't believe them. It would be nice if it were clean and we could see the easement to them, which would probably lead to the easement to Burwell, which would lead to the easement to Brewer, which would lead to the easement to US Light and Energy. Do you have that, Jim? Is that something you can provide? Do you have that easement?
I would have to go to, and get my documents out.
Well, absolutely. We
And-
obviously have our easement.
My lawyer actually has that paperwork at this moment.
Because there may be something in there that's contradictory to what we're hearing. So it could, I'm saying this because it could be to your benefit to provide that to us.
It could be to the company's benefit to look at it and know what they're talking about as well.
Well, absolutely. We want to make it right here. That's our job.
And contact us.
So Mark and Jim and Pam, do you have each other's contact?
I do. As of today, I received it today.
I would suspect that just an email to the business email address is not enough, that you guys should talk on the phone.
I believe I have that as well. I'll double check right now.
Mr. Murray, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Have we discussed anything that you need to weigh in on?
Not at this point in time. We're a long ways from me.
Yes, we are. So before I give any additional comments, does anybody else have anything to say on board or otherwise?
I do. Mike, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I'm wondering on this map, the screening, why does it end at the division between the Roses house and the Roses business? How come it doesn't go all the way over to the cooperative extension line? Is there a reason for that?
The reason it's shown as that is that it was our understanding of the town code that the screening would be required for a residential property, but not for commercial. But obviously that's something that, is, further discussion is needed, please let us know.
Okay, so you made a decision on that.
Correct.
Anybody else? Okay, so here's where we are. I spoke with the town attorney yesterday. He's late to the game due to his inability to actually see the documents for a while. Everything has been forwarded to him. He would like to particularly look at the seeker and the original application. He apologizes for coming into the game late. He does want to take a look at everything. This is our first project. We want to do it right because we've got two more right on the heels of this one. I spoke to one today. I'm gonna look at a site at Route 11, roughly across from Route 11 Truck and Repair in the new hospital building. They're a long ways away from even approaching us to have a meeting, but they just wanted to reach out and say hi. So we want to get this one right. This is our first one, and we want to make sure that we do it right for the code, for the town, for the neighbors, and for the developer, obviously. So we want to make sure that all parties walk away from this happy. So the attorney wants some time to look at this. I want to get him this easement to see if he can do some research on that. I believe, Bob, he was already going to do some of that earlier. I think we notified him after the first meeting.
Correct.
So I suspect that that's going to take some time. So we would like to let him have the time to weigh in on this, weigh in on the new information that came in recently. Your responses to our last meeting. Let him have everything. I would also like, if anything transpires between the company and Roses, that we are made aware of that sooner than later, so that we can get that to the attorney also before we meet again, so that, some of this can probably be hashed out before we get to the point where we can call for a public hearing. I suspect we're a couple meetings away from that at this point. Large part of which is, the delay in getting to the Roses, which is, I think I can speak for the board when I say we would be uneasy with moving forward until you have had a chance to talk with them.
Mike, can I ask one question?
Sure.
Do I have the diagrams, the pictures that we're looking at tonight? Do I have those?
If you don't, you will at the end of the meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
I think you were included on that email, but I will send them along to you anyway.
Okay, just
And
want to make
also,
sure I have them.
if you're going to include that in the packet, I'll send this latest one about the easement along with it.
Perfect.
Again, the attorney does apologize for coming into the game late, but I'd rather he were in it late when we were going to get a hold of him anyway. The seeker is a full seeker, which is something this board is not used to doing. Matter of fact, as long as I've been on the board, we've never done it. It needs to be done right. We need to know that it was done right. I looked it over. It did look right. There were some inconsistencies, I think, but as the developer has said all along, that the first couple of meetings were just to get a feel from the board on how we would react, what we would need, what we would request. before we get anywhere near a final public hearing where the public's involved and, you know, we always try to make sure the landowner is involved, but, you know, it's not always possible, and we don't always reach out to them. We don't always know in time who the neighboring properties are. So I think we are safe in calling another meeting. If nobody
Mike?
has any other questions or comments.
Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
You iterated that I could get the information from the code enforcement, and it sounds like the code enforcement doesn't even have the documents.
I think he was included in that email, but that email string is starting to get pretty long now. We need to start a new one.
Okay,
'Cause,
just-
I do know that Bill has been very good in including all the parties when he sends an email out.
Okay, thank
I
you for
can double check that.
Mike, yeah, he was included, but obviously, we'll continue to include, you know,
I
Jeff.
need to start a new email string. This one's getting pretty long.
Sure. We can start a new one.
Yeah, Jeff, I'll get all that information to you.
Okay, and that might have been my mistake. I might have just missed it.
It- Trust me, it's easy enough in this string to miss.
Okay.
Board members, anything? Okay, so while everybody's here, is the 19th good for a meeting?
I have a question, Mike.
Oh, chime in.
Does this need to go back to the county, or is it just up to us to approve it or not?
It does not go back to the county. I mean,
Okay.
typically, no. I mean, we are not under any statutory obligation to send it to the
All
county.
right, very
It's
good.
not out of turn to reach out to the county and say, hey, what do you think about this?
I think that would be wise after we're done collecting all the data, just to get their opinion or comments on the revised packet. And I feel that we're really close to getting all the information we need to make a decision. There's just a couple of, strangling or, pieces that are included yet in their site plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it said earlier that, we got to the county probably a little bit before we normally would in the process, but to have their thoughts early was important in this project. I have certainly reached out to Jason or Matilda in the past, and say, hey, you guys ruled this is what happened. What do you think? And so, we can send the whole thing back to them. It won't, I don't believe it would constitute a full review. And I'm not sure about the legalities of that, but certainly they would be happy to take a look at it for us.
I would
Mike?
agree with Debbie on that.
Good idea.
Mhm.
And
They, and I think I explained this early on, that the county planning staff was instrumental in helping us create this code.
Right.
To clarify-
They were handicapped by not having our minutes, so, to be fair to them.
To clarify, when you're talking about the 19th, are you talking the 19th of December, January?
Well, certainly not December.
Well, you didn't say, so
I know, I'm sorry, January 19th.
thank you.
I have no idea at this point if it would be a in-person or Zoom meeting. I'm assuming the developers would prefer it to be, would prefer to attend Zoom, but that's certainly can happen. For the rest of us, I don't know. We can only pray that it's an in-person meeting.
I think this works out pretty well to do it.
It
by
does. In my case, I've got two laptops going, so I've got all the information on one and
Right.
the meeting on another. So well, I probably have more information at my fingertips here than I would in the boardroom. If anybody is going to leave the meeting, I'd like the board to stay on. I think we are done with this portion of the meeting. If anybody wants to stay on, you're more than welcome to.
certainly appreciate everybody's time tonight. And I would just ask, this would be something I would probably lean over and ask Bill, but I'll just do it. And that's the only downside to Zoom is you can't lean over and ask somebody a quiet question. But just about the seeker and kind of lead agency declaration and what that process might look like. I know, Mike, you said that you're not quite there yet, but just for my edification, kind of what the expectation is on that process.
Typically, because this is our jurisdiction totally, the planning board is the final say unless something is challenged. This does not go to the town board in Canton. So we would be the lead agency, which is why we're relying on the attorney to look at this for us and make sure it's clean, I guess is the best word for it.
Yeah,
It will stay with us.
Okay, no, I mean, that that was really just for my kind of clarification on, as I go back and report the.
No, in Canton, the town code is, the planning board is the final authority. It does not go like to a higher authority like the town board.
Yeah.
It stays with us.
So we certainly are in favor and encourage attorney review. That's something that we do with our landowners and at all times, and we do internally as well. So we're certainly on board with that. We look forward to making good progress between now and the next meeting. And the Roses can expect to hear from me. I know they've heard that before, but this time we'll make that a reality.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak?
Then I think there's just a few minor revisions for the decommissioning plan and showing on your plan what your signage specs are going to be and the interconnectivity of the above the ground poles with the solar array. I think we need to see that before our next meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll do our best to try and provide some sort of a rendering of what it would look like from various vantage points with the mature vegetation there.
Sounds great.
I think I'm satisfied with the noise question. I can't speak for everybody else, but if you could share anything, 70 dBs at 10 feet, now you take that out to 400 feet, you're talking about noise that I certainly wouldn't be able to hear with my hearing aids, but
yeah. I can provide
just for clarification,
some supportive documentation on that.
Right,
sure.
Please, thank you. Okay, I think we are done with this portion of the meeting. The agenda included nothing else, but does the board have anything else to discuss?
Are you asking for further discussion, Mike?
On further discussion on this or any other matter?
I think you covered this, the question, but I didn't quite get it clear in this fee. The fee part, G part of our solar law, it pretty well lays out the application fee. That's 1% of the cost of the project that comes. It doesn't exactly say when it comes, but it comes pretty close to the beginning of this deal.
Yeah, are you looking at our solar law?
Yes.
We left this so that the town board would
Yeah.
be in charge of the fee part of that to insulate the planning board a little bit from the process of collecting money. We didn't want to be influenced by negotiating fees as part of the planning process. So this was purposely left to the town board, and it's probably a question I don't know if Bob can address or will address or is able to address at this point. I know that the town board has had some discussions about this.
Yeah, I could speak to that. Our attorney is in the process of drafting a letter now to US Light and Energy with regard to that part of the town law. having our attorney come into this late, I would say that we're behind in having that discussion. The way the law reads, that upon application is when we're supposed to take care of that 1%. And that was an oversight. Again, as Mike said, this is our first time down this road with a project of this size. And so the learning curve is a little steep, and that's one of those things that didn't get recognized one way or another right off the top. But again, our attorney is in the process. You should receive a letter this week, and he's hoping to have a discussion once you get back to him on that.
That sounds good. And we've actually sent some communication your way too with regard to a tax agreement, a tax treatment for a project like this, whether it's a pilot or RPTL 487. But that we're certainly ready to have that discussion. So we'll look for that communication from the town attorney, give him some time to catch up, and then we're happy to engage on that.
So yeah, we did get your letter, and I think we had letters cross each other in the mail. And again, he's going to be drafting a second one with regard to the specific, I guess, application fees, the 1% that John referred to. So we'll be looking forward to your response.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I asked about that fee is because the fee looks like it covers a lot of costs that might be incurred in researching an application like this. And it's funny, here we are doing the application research. The fee hasn't been paid. We can't hire the consultants if we chose to hire a consultant. So it's really kind of goofy in a way. And maybe I'm looking at this wrong. Write me if I'm wrong there, Mike, please.
Well, I can add. Can I just add to that, Mike?
Sure.
If it's okay, because I mean, you're spot on, John. It's something that should have been recognized earlier on, because the spirit of that 1% is to have monies available to hire an environmental engineer, maybe additional legal assistance, or even pay the attorney that we have right now that is already spending time on this. So the intent of it is that if in the research of processing an application like this, that we have resources available to us to hire the right people to help walk us through these issues at no expense to the Canton taxpayer. Because just in case the project gets pulled in a month by the developer, we're out all of our time, and not only time, but our investment. And so it's a way of covering the investment of the Canton taxpayer as we review these projects. But I agree with your sentiment, John. I think the cart got out before the horse on this a little bit. And again, the learning curve is steep, and that's why I agree of taking this slow, so that while we're learning, we're doing it in a way that everybody is heard, and everybody gets to make the best decisions. Thank you.
That being said, there was nothing to prevent us from asking the town to hire somebody. I don't think any of us were at that point where we thought we needed outside help beyond the town attorney, who we knew was going to get into the game, at some point in time. So to answer your question, John, I think, Bob answered it better than I can, but we did always have that option to reach out to the town board and said, hey, we need some help here. We need, we'd like to hire somebody, and knowing that the town board would recoup the money afterwards anyway.
Right. All right, that soothes the soul a bit. On another thing, Jim Rose did a lot of research and put out a 6 or 7 page document on a lot of his concerns, and he didn't even touch surface tonight with hardly any of it. So are we gonna sit down, have a sit down and address Jim Rose's problems?
Well, what I, like the most of the board, only saw that today, and I, like Jim and Pam, had to work today. I did see some of it. Some of it has merit. Some of it I totally understand their side. Some of it is totally unrelated to what we do here at the site plan process.
Right. Well,
So,
what-
it's something that we should address probably at the next meeting. Jim and Pam didn't bring many of their points up. We certainly haven't had a chance as a board to digest it, to intelligently discuss it. I mean, I glanced through it quickly this morning before I sent it out to you guys, or you sent it to me.
Right. Well, I mean, can we have a meeting and not a meeting among the planning board to go through this?
All our meetings are public.
Well, I mean, public, fine, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be with the developer. It can be just with the public and us and go through Jim Rose's concerns. Is that a proper way to do things?
If the rest of the board agrees, that certainly wouldn't object to it.
So we would certainly like an opportunity to see that document and have a chance to maybe address some of those things. Having not seen it, I don't know what's in it.
I would suggest that you and Jim and Pam get together with that document.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay,
Probably, John, that a lot of the issues could be solved between them before it gets back to us.
well, that would be a good thing.
Yes, but some of the issues, reading it through quickly, it's not going to be something that the developer can address, and it's not going to be something that we can address. I mean,
Okay,
just not within our scope.
good, thanks.
And if there's any unanswered questions after all that, then we can certainly discuss a meeting, that doesn't, public meeting, anybody can show up.
By the way, I'm sorry to get late to the meeting. For some reason, I thought it was at 7 o'clock.
I wondered where you were.
Oh,
We
give me a
thought you
break.
missed us.
I don't know how I made that mistake. But I apologize. That's the 10th apology of the night.
Okay.
So good to see your face.
They were all
That's
meaningful.
9 for me and 1 for you.
So if there's no other business before the board, the only other thing that I have to bring up is a touch of sad news.
Uh-oh.
Well, it is with deep regret that I inform you that this is Mr. Howie's last meeting.
Oh, come on.
I'm sorry, Joel, put you on the spot like that, but Joel has chosen not to be reappointed.
I've served 10 years on this board, and it took me a lot of thinking. I put a lot of thought into this. I have, as a lot of you guys know, I have 2 businesses that I'm running, and one of them is, I think is growing. So I need to
Yay.
pay more attention to that. And just keep things going. But doesn't mean I'm gone. I'm still around.
Trust me, I told you I'd be reaching out to you.
That's right.
Well,
but officially, Joel, we thank you, and personally, I thank you for
Oh,
your
yeah.
service.
You're welcome.
thank you, Joel.
It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you,
working
Joel.
with you guys.
Yes.
Thank you, Joel.
You're
Well,
welcome.
Thank you, it's right.
And if there's nothing else, I'll let us leave on that sad note. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Bob, you can stop.
Thank you, Mike.
you.